It's found inside the Mazda RX-7, RX-8, and the 787B race car. It emits terrible emissions and consumes a lot of oil. I'm talking about the rotary engine, and today I'll give you a sneak peek into Mazda's latest patents that indicates Mazda will bring it back, and not just as a range extender. And hang tight to hear about their 12-rotor engine that was made recently. Rotary engine is quite unique from piston engines. You may have heard the word Wankel associated with rotary engines. Here's why. The Wankel rotary engine was named after its inventor, Felix Wankel. He was just 22 years old when he conceived it, and 27 when he won his first patent. That was back in 1929. Felix's version was to create an engine that was lightweight, efficient, cheap, and easy to repair. Throughout the 1950s, he worked to develop a new engine that wasn't based on cylinders and pistons. Instead, Wankel's engine used a triangular rotor and oval-shaped housing. Since then, some have even called it a spinning Dorito because of its triangular shape. Triangle shape in a rotary engine is ideal because it's mathematically the most effective configuration within that housing. With the rotary engine, the rotor revolves around the housing. All 3 points of the rotor remain in constant contact with the edge of the housing. This creates 3 separate sections that constantly expand and contract as the piston moves around the output shaft. A small pocket of air then expands into a larger pocket to create a vacuum. After that, air and fuel are injected into this vacuum to the intake ports of the combustion chamber. This air and fuel mixture is then compressed against the flat side of the housing. This combustible mixture is ignited by 2 spark plugs, and then the exhaust gases are forced out at high pressure. Strangely enough, the rotary engine's origin can be traced back as far as the late 1800s. It was found in aviation and motorbikes. The earlier version was a type of piston engine with a rotating crankcase, and they usually had an odd number of pistons like 5, 7, or 9. But it wasn't until decades later that Felix Wankel came along and created the pistonless Wankel rotary engine that we know today. There's been a lot of controversy around the Wankel rotary. Slowly but surely, it faded away from the car market in the 2000s. And the reason for that came down to the law, but not American or Japanese law. It was because of European law, in particular the strict Euro 5 emissions regulations. Because of this, Mazda had to stop selling its RX-8 in Europe after 2010. It just couldn't meet the emissions regulations. To make matters worse, rotary engines were relatively rare, so it wasn't easy to find parts when you had to replace or repair them. And even if you did find the right parts, then you also had to find a mechanic who knew how to fix a rotary engine. Also, when it comes to city driving, a rotary engine has a short lifespan between rebuilds and usually lasts less than 100,000 miles. True, some Mazda RX-8 owners were able to get longer lifespans out of the rotary engines, but it was usually the same people who mainly drove their vehicles on the highway at a steady speed. By the way, the RX-8 wasn't the only vehicle that used the rotary engine. There were others. There was even the REPU, which was also known as the rotary engine pickup. So what killed the rotary engine? You could say it killed itself. At its core, the rotary engine came with inherent flaws. First of all, the rotary engine usually has a low thermal efficiency because of the shape of the combustion chamber and also lower compression ratio. Basically, there are 2 spark plugs that ignite the air-fuel mixture. As they rotate, boom, combustion. Once the flame starts, it wants to travel out and ignite the air-fuel mixture. But here's the thing. In the rotary engine, this flame has to travel a longer distance to ignite all the mixture. That's why it's harder to ignite. Finally, it gets to the end and hits the exhaust port, but some of the air and fuel doesn't get burned. So basically, you're sending some of that fuel out the exhaust. That's why you've probably seen rotary engines spitting flames out of the exhaust, because it didn't burn all the fuel within the combustion stroke. And that means lower thermal efficiency, less fuel economy, and higher emissions. Speaking of fuel economy, in some cases, vehicles with piston engines have more than 55% better fuel economy than cars with rotary engines. Another common problem with rotary engine has to do with the seals. The rotary engine has apex seals, face seals, and side seals. Purpose of the seals is to prevent the gas in each chamber from mixing together. But here's the tricky part. Combustion only happens on one side. This causes a huge difference in temperature on each side. So you have metal expanding in different ways on different sides of the housing. And that makes it very difficult to create a good seal. Any problem in a seal means that some of the air in pocket 1 may leak over into another chamber. That's not to say these issues aren't addressable. There are a few ways to make them more reliable. For example, all combustion engines, including piston-based ones, all face the same issue of carbon deposits. This occurs in the process of combustion, and you can't avoid the natural byproduct, which is carbon. But in rotary engines, carbon buildup is a more severe problem. Carbon buildup causes pre-ignition, which causes the engine to jerk backwards, and the corner seals can get so flat you can't even remove them, and then the rotor wobbles. One solution is E85, which is a blend of 85% ethanol and 15% gasoline. You could also try pre-mixing the oil using something like Valvoline VR1 2050 full synthetic oil to lubricate the bearings, the E-shafts, and the gears on the sides of the rotors. Then disconnect and block off the oil metering pump system and instead try using your own pre-mixed oil instead. Despite its flaws, the rotary engine has advantages. For example, the rotary engine really packs a punch for its size. There honestly aren't many naturally aspirated piston engines that can compete with the rotary engine. For example, a rotary-powered Mazda RX-8 can pump out 174 brake horsepower per liter. Compare that to the 8-liter quad-turbo 16-cylinder Bugatti Veyron, which pumps out 148 brake horsepower per liter. Rotary engines are very efficient at making power. Remember, too, that the rotary engine doesn't reciprocate like piston engines. Instead, it just spins in one direction. So it means no vibrations in your car, and you get a quieter engine and a smoother, more balanced ride. The rotary engine is also smaller than a piston engine. It allows an EV maker to optimize it as an EV first, deciding where to place the rotary engine and the generator it helps to turn. So you can optimize the car's interior space since batteries aren't crammed in as an afterthought. Mazda's been a pioneer in a rotary engine before things tapered down. But now, I don't know if you remember, but way back when Mazda first announced its iconic rotary engines were making a comeback, the fans got really excited. But then Mazda clarified that the engine would come in the form of a range extender for an electric SUV. Mazda unveiled its latest version of the rotary engine at its MX-30e Skyactiv REV. Boy, that's a mouthful. According to reports, it will use a two-piece apex seal design. The rotary design will be configured like a generator and expected to extend the vehicle's driving range up to 373 miles. At the end of the day, it really is just a range extender, and a far cry from the conventional rotary engine that Mazda fans were hoping for. But actually, this too may change, and sooner than you think. This past June, it was reported that Mazda had filed 6 brand new patents for the Japanese Patent Office. These patents detail new designs for a 2-rotor Wankel rotary engine. So the obvious question now is, will we see a successor to the RX-7 and RX-8 sports cars? Well, 3 of the 6 patents specifically relate to the design of the rotors themselves to improve the fuel efficiency of a rotary engine. Each outer face of the rotor has new designs with the recess cut out in different width, length, and depth. These shapes of the recesses would help accelerate and control the flame growth. It would also prevent any additional heat and noise from being generated with incomplete combustion. Also, instead of just having a rectangular recess, in these patents, Mazda produces a wider, deeper recess at the center of the rotor. But the leading and trailing edges have a shallower, narrower recess, and this means a depressurization and repressurization of the fuel-air mixture can be possible, and that in turn would decrease and increase the ignitability of the fuel. The other 3 patents focus mostly on the air intake structure of the rotary engine. While all 3 specifically mention a single rotor engine, they can probably be applied to dual rotor applications too. One of these patents explains an air intake structure that could mix intake air with exhaust fumes. The other 2 patents explain how it would attach to the engine. Also, they explain how the EGR tube would be constructed to be more rigid. This would hopefully suppress vibration of the intake manifold and allow smoother airflow. Anyway, the 6th latest patent filing sends a clear message. Mazda's trying to fix the biggest problems with the rotary engine. So yes, a rotary-powered Mazda sports car might arrive sooner than you think. Recently, the 12-rotor engine was built in a home garage by Tyson Garvin. He's an endurance powerboat racer. Now, this monster engine stands out for many reasons. First of all, one bank of rotors spins back and counter-rotates. You have almost any choice of how you fire the rotors. Whether it's 2 firing at a time on different sides on each side or 12 individual firings, it's up to you. The front, back, and center rotors counterbalance each other. That means that you don't need counterweights. The gears in the motor are connected in a similar way to what you see in a clock tower. Think Big Ben. And get this, there's only one oil drain on this entire 12-rotor engine. Oh, and did I mention it can output 2,000 horsepower at idle? Supposedly, if you feed the engine with race fuel and methanol, the engine can achieve over 5,000 horsepower. There's no hard proof yet, but in theory, it could. Not only is this the world's biggest rotor engine to date, but it's also one of the first billet engines out there, meaning that it's not cast from liquid nor forged from heated metal, but rather it's made from a single block of material that's machined down on a CNC mill. We're talking about ultimate precision and strength. But like any engine, this 12-rotor engine is far from flawless. Sure, it may look cool, but it's not perfect. Here are some of the problems with 12-rotor engines. First of all, it generates a lot of heat. Just look at the size of it. Its radiator has been likened to a massive ocean. That's how big it is. Another issue is the width of the rotor. The width varies. To make it a more practical, mass-produced product, it would be better to standardize how wide the rotors are. By doing that, the rotors can be interchanged anywhere in the engine. As well, the aluminum is a lot weaker on the two sides where the gear will experience most of the force, which is another area that could be improved. But now you tell me, are you interested in seeing the rotary engine make its big comeback? Or do you think it deserves to stay buried in a graveyard of old car technology? Please share by commenting below. If you like this video, please like, share, and subscribe. Thanks for your support.